you have to be confident, and you have to be confident in what you do and be able to communicate that to the athlete so that they can go out and win.
Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I am your host, Richard Thompson. Today we have Stan Garland on the show. He is an Olympic level physiotherapist. He has been my physio for the last 2 years, and truly someone who I can't explain the wealth of experience and his ability in a treatment room for his athletes is second to none. He's gone to 3 Olympics, countless world championships, World Cups all over the world. He's worked with gold medalists Anna Meares and Sally Pearson, and he's just had this incredible career. And I wanted to get him in to the studio and talk about all of that and his lessons from that as well. So sit back, enjoy Stan, and if you do enjoy this episode or any of the episodes that Cody and I put together, we'd love it if you could please rate or review wherever you listen to the podcast. But for now, here is Stan Garland. Stan Garland, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard.
I remember when you came to the coast and I was training for Ultraman, and someone said, and I was looking for a physio because I had my own deficiencies, and someone said, actually 2 people said, Stan Garland's now arrived on the coast. You need to see him. Mm-hmm. And then I went and saw you. I think it was, I don't know when I was first, whether it was your house or otherwise, but I've never been with a physio that comes close to what you're able to do. So I'm so lucky to have you in my corner and have had in my corner for my athletic time. But I wanted to get you in to talk about your methodologies and why you got into it. But for a little background as well, you've been to 3 Olympic Games as an Olympic physio to athletes like Anna Meares, Sally Pearson, both for cycling and for track running. And so I don't think there's anyone who would be more equipped to talk about what you learnt from that experience and what you learnt from those sort of athletes who are easily the world's best at what they do. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Sure.
And thank you for spending a little bit of time.
No problems.
So how did you get into it?
Into Olympics or?
Into physio initially.
Into physio. Well, I mean, I was an aspiring tennis player back in the day, and probably got to the point at about 16 years old where I realised I wasn't at the level that was going to make a career out of it. And, it's the time when you need to decide what your future occupation is going to be. And at that time, probably modern physio was just evolving. So that's in the mid-80s, early 80s. And I decided to put my head in the books, and actually I just watched the rugby this morning, Rugby World Cup. I used to watch the Wallabies physio running out onto the field thinking, well, that'd be a pretty cool job. I've had no aspirations to become a GP. I didn't want to hand out pills and have sick people in my rooms all the time. I thought, well, this is the way to do it, get my sport fix and take it to a new level. So at that stage, I wasn't even aware that physios worked in hospitals, let alone with kids and obs and gynae and neurology and all the weird things. My focus was on sports physio. And so I turned up at the physio course day one, and they promptly said, well, we're going to take you for a tour through the hospital. And I looked sideways and went, what are we doing here?
Where are the athletes?
Yeah, so I was probably a bit naive, but that was my focus right through the course. So 4 years of study, and back then most people were obliged to do a year's rotation in a hospital, and myself and who became my first partner decided, well, we don't want to do that. We just want to go straight out into private practice. So that's what we did. So pretty quickly in at about 22 years of age, I had my own practice with my partner, and it was a baptism of fire because we had to learn pretty quickly and we were inexperienced. So a lot of those times, it wasn't Google, there wasn't things to look at. So I'd come home after seeing people and sort of go, well, what do I do with this fella? And I'd be going to the books and just, I suppose that's been the focus of my career, is making people better as quickly as I could. And so even in that realm now, when I have a student perhaps sitting with me, I go, well, you listen to the patient, you do an examination, and you try and make that person leave better than when they walked in. So it might be in the way you communicate, hopefully it's in the hand-on treatment that you give them. In some way, they're enlightened and better for when they leave your rooms. So that started back in the day when I was under pressure as a fairly fresh new graduate. So it's just come from there, and my passion for sport developed that sort of pathway. So I got involved in whatever I could. You can't just become an Olympic physio with no experience. You have to do your time. So my time was in football clubs and cricket clubs. I got involved through connections into pro running, and I think that, I just had a passion for knowledge. I just wanted to learn and do new things. So I got to a point, I split off from my partner. I was a solo practitioner. I was working after hours 3 nights a week with a local football team all day Saturday, and I just thought, well, I'm not learning here and I'm not getting the experience that I need to get better. So I made the call when there was a big shortage of good physios in America, and they were paying your way to come over, we'll put you up for a job, we'll pay your relocation costs. I thought, well, this is an opportunity. So at that stage I was married with 2 young kids, 32. I packed up, shipped off to America for 4 years, and I just wanted to be involved in American sports, so baseball, American football, and went to work in a clinic that they promised that but didn't deliver. And in that time it was like, well, I've moved my family here, I'm not getting the experience. But in that time I'd made an impression on a couple of the local physical medicine specialists, and one of those guys said, look, we're setting up a spinal rehab unit and we'd really like you to be involved because you've got some skills that our local guys don't have. So I waited around for a year while that was being developed, and then worked side by side with him and 2 or 3 spinal surgeons.
What was the experience like that?
And so that set me off in another world, because I'd always worked by myself. I was around other physios, but it was very disjointed back in the day in Australia. So your doctors worked in one clinic, physios were in another, orthopaedics was in another, and the communication lines were a bit strained. So I moved to America and I worked in a clinic where everyone was under one roof, and I really loved it. So, a 2-year experience became 4, and I had 2 more kids that were young Americans then, and we decided as a family that we were going to move back to Australia when the oldest was due to start school. So I went, thanks very much, time for me to go home. So I came home. And
were you still doing sport physio?
Well, I got involved with a AAA baseball team,
and
that's after whinging to one of my bosses, and I also covered the professional bull riding for a couple of years.
Perfect.
So I don't know how that equates to it, but
I said sports then.
Well, they call it a sport, but
sure.
Some cowboy would get kicked in the chest by a big bull, and I'd run out and go, "How you going, mate?" And they'd cough and splutter. And
it's not exactly the physio running out on the Wallabies game, is it?
Not quite. But it's all experience, I suppose.
Sure. So you came home.
But I came home, and then I was in a quandary, because I'm going, well, I really don't want to be the solo physio on the corner.
Yeah.
Because I'd enjoyed my experience in the States, working with specialists and being part of a team, and just having that professional banter. It was great for the patients, because if there was an issue, I could put a fire out quickly, or I could order an injection through a doctor or a scan. I just enjoyed that. So in the meantime, Adelaide had developed what is still now, 30-odd years later, one of the premier sports clinics in Australia. And I had a bit of respect before I'd left, so I went to one of the key physios in there and said, hey, look, I'm back. I'm looking for a job. And then at that point, they were looking at a succession plan and looking to bring on some young physios. So he said, well, it's good timing. And I went to him with an option saying, well, I'd like to open a satellite of your clinic. And they said, well, that'd be great. So I ended up buying in for what in that day was big dollars. And I thought, well, if I'm going to stay here for 10 years plus, it's a worthwhile expense for me for the referral base, for the connection with the surgeons, for a whole range of things. So pretty well bought in and didn't look back. So I became a partner, and I spent 20-something years there before deciding to come up here. And those connections led to involvement with the Australian track cycling team through doctors that were involved, and I spent 2 years in the first 2 years with Adelaide United in the soccer as their treating physio. So I did a few things until the Olympic sort of option opened up.
So you came back, rewind a little bit. That would have been
2000 I came back from America.
But the decision to put a hefty amount for a buy-in, was
At
that a difficult decision, or because of the unknown, or how did you go about making that decision?
It was difficult because at the time, I sold my practice for $5,000. So basically, it was the goodwill is worth nothing when the person leaves.
Sure.
It's the cost of your equipment. So back then, I bought in for something like $120,000. So that was in the year 2000, which was a lot of money. So you'd think, well, I had to make a call because I'm going, well, I can't see another physio coming in and buying my share. I'm going to diffuse that 120 grand over 10 years. Is it worth, 10, 12 grand a year for the experience of an opportunity to work there? And I went, yes, it is. And at the end of the day, 20 years on, I was able to sell my share. And
you look back and go, that was really
it was a good
really
decision.
Yeah.
But back then it was difficult. So
did you lose much sleep over it, or you?
Well, yes, I did, because I had a young family. I didn't have a lot of coin. It was a lot of money. But the upside of it and the doors that it opened.
Yeah, but you didn't know that at the time.
I didn't know it, no.
Yeah. Do you look back and, what would you have told yourself anything different? But you took that chance anyway, right?
Took the chance, yeah. And it was working with the best surgeons, the best doctors, and the best physios that were in the city at the time. So I'm sure I could have gone out and been a solo practitioner, but in the, let's say, 10 years after that, then you saw the pressure on solo practitioners and the sort of healthcare models changed a little bit, at least in Adelaide. It's probably not like that up here, which is what I've noticed in the 2 years.
Yeah, right. And then how did the introduction to the Australian track cycling team and the Olympic door opening? Talk to me about that.
Well, I said I was involved with soccer and football, and then one of the key GPs for the cycling team was in our clinic, and the physio at that time moved on to rowing, and that door opened up. So I was an avid triathlete. I was well known in the clinic. I enjoyed the bikes and the running and all the rest of it. So he came to me and said, how'd you like to come and work with the cycling team? So I got a hand up through him, Dr. Peter Barnes, and I was excited. I thought, wow, this is another level. This is what I've wanted to do for
move over bullfighting.
15 years. So, 15 years of physio before that door opens. But I've done a lot of work to get to that point. And I became involved, but then I realised that cycling back then was still old school. So the cycling teams revolved around, or the healthcare involved around a soigneur. The doctor was there and a very good doctor, but the physical care
was all the swanee.
Was just a swanee doing massages and really not doing much of anything.
Right.
So I used to get calls from the AIS. So the track program was based in Adelaide, and I'd get calls from the head physio in Canberra saying, we want physical screens of all our athletes. So the first year I did it, and they would take me a couple of hours to do, collate, report, and I'd do a flexibility, muscle testing, range of motion. I'd have them bring their bikes in and I'd do a physio screen of them on the bikes, and I'd feed all that information back to Canberra. It went to the coaches, but the coaches didn't really know what to do with it because their experience was dealing with a swanee. And, 1 year in, I went to the coach, it was a Canadian fella, and I said, look, I'm doing all these things. I'm not quite sure if you really understand what a physical screen is, but what benefit it can be to you as a coach, let alone the strength and conditioning component to the program. So if we do it correctly, my information should go back to the strength and conditioning guy, and then everyone has a specific area that they'll need to work on. Some people it's flexibility in the hips, some it's basic strength. But at the end of the day, if we can stop particularly the overuse injuries in the sport, then we keep people training and the programs can progress. And in the end, I got involved with that. I got involved with aerodynamics and just getting people's bodies set up into the program. So I kind of pushed that button, and that allowed me to have more contact with strength and conditioning. And then the programming through the coaches actually changed, and it's become more of what modern physiotherapy is now. So it's more performance-based injury prevention. And obviously we treat the injuries when they come along, but we kept data of that and showed that the percentage of injuries dropped significantly.
By focusing on injury prevention.
And by using the screens effectively. So I'd have a list, if someone came into the program, there might be 20 points on that I'd pick up in a screen. And then we do mini screens
along the way.
3 months, 6 months, and then they do a full screen every year. By the second or third year of that program, we had these key factors of attention down to a handful of points.
Yeah, right.
So that was documented.
That's cool.
And then physio became an important part of the program.
Yeah. And then what was it like? So your direct work with Anna Mears, multiple world champion and gold medalist. Mm-hmm. What was that like? Were you dealing with a lot of high-performing athletes? Are there...
Well, and it was new for me. So I'd come out of team sports effectively through football and soccer. Anna had just come into the program. So she was one of the first ones that I screened at 21 years of age. I was the treating physio, so I worked in the program, but I still ran my clinic so the athletes would come and see me. And so, you develop a rapport with those people over time, go to competitions, World Cups, and you become someone that they would rely on under pressure, I suppose. So... I enjoyed that, and they obviously had some faith in me, and so that rapport for her was right through her career until she finished after 2016 in Rio. So, yeah. Nothing
that you could see stood her apart from other high performers that maybe didn't get to her level?
Well, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be involved with athletics too along the way, and then married the two sports and somehow ended up looking after Sally Pearson. So at the same time, I went to London Olympics, did the first week with track cycling, and the second week with track and field, and just moved camps.
Yeah,
so,
that's cool.
But if you take those two girls, and I've followed them through, both of them for 10 years of their career, similar animals. I had the weight of pressure on them, and Australia's good at loading up their gold medal talents with extra pressure, and both those girls could handle it and come through with the goods.
How do you think, so Sally, for those who don't know, Sally's a 100-metre hurdleist, the females, gold medalist. How did you see that they work through that pressure? Because I couldn't imagine when you get a chance, for Olympic sports, especially when you're a gold medal favourite, you get one heat semi-final, you have 3 opportunities to stuff that up every 4 years. Yeah. And it's not like you're ranked number 1, so you're in the final. You've got to make sure you don't stuff it up on the heats and stuff it up in the semis. But then on the final comes, this is it for 4 years. It's not a World Cup. It's not a World Championship. Did you see anything, and you're there as well, presumably the morning of the final, working on her, looking, what did you take away from all that?
Well, I saw, if I probably work one-on-one more with Sally, because I used to, she had a bad back, a disky back that...
disky back. That's the...
As a hurdler, it's not ideal.
That's the medical term, disky back?
Disky back. She had a degenerative disc. And that was around the World Champs 2009. So I was an underling physio at that point, and she was an emerging superstar. And I sat in the background. I had a forte in back management from having done work in America for the best part of 4 years. And I'm not the most forthright person, so I probably stood back in the wing. I did stand back in the wings, and she's quite reserved and quiet behind the scenes. And so I let the other physios do their thing and blow lots of smoke, and I came in at the end and did some things to her that were perhaps a little bit different. Nothing outrageous, but she liked it. And whether it was maybe the next year, I got a phone call sitting in my office in Adelaide from her going, "Hey, it's me. Just wondered whether you'd be interested in coming to Europe in July for 6 weeks because I'm doing the Diamond League circuit and I need a physio." And I always made a pact with myself with that. So whenever I was invited to stuff, and because I was a partner, I could leave.
Yep.
But I went. So that relationship developed and probably just became her like a positive influence behind the scenes for her. So one of her things, I suppose, behind the scenes was, she had a niggly back and, my hamstring, and I do all the fine-tuning, and a lot of that was just verbal stuff going, well, no, Sally, this is good and that's good and your body's fine and you'll be fine. And I can remember before she went out to win the gold medal in London, we were under the wings doing run-throughs, and she was coming in between...
The night of the final?
Before in the warm-up.
Right.
Quizzing me about my hamstring. I feel my hamstring. And I remember sitting there with her husband going, I've checked it, double-checked it, triple-checked it.
There's nothing wrong with it.
She's fine. And I'm delivering that message to her, and I can remember saying to him, geez, I glad. I hope I've got this right because
Yeah,
she does a hamstring now. I'm in all sorts. It might have been in one of the heats, so I can't remember. But it was a pressure moment. But a lot of it with those people in that situation is to try and be, well, you have to be confident, and you have to be confident in what you do and be able to communicate that to the athlete so that they can go out and win. And Sally was one of the best at coming up with the goods in the heat of the moment. So she would go at least one of those goals as not being favourite and line up in the final and just put it together. Flawless technique, determination and willpower, and come up with Anamia's similar thing. So she broke her neck, which has been in all the press and famous for it. And that was in a World Cup race in America in, let's say, January. I reckon it was before the Beijing Olympics. And I was home. I wasn't there. I got the call from the doctor that was there saying we're bringing her home. And I remember seeing her just banged up. She had a broken collarbone. She'd fractured her C2 in her neck. And her focus was on getting to Beijing. So with a high fracture in the neck,
6 or 7 months later,
you run the risk of they can kill you. You can't breathe if it severs your spinal cord. So we treated her with kid gloves, but she didn't want to detrain. So there was pressure on January, February. And I remember going to a coach when we first put her on the track bike, and she basically had the track to herself. And I can remember saying to the mechanic, like, you put new tyres on that thing and you make sure she doesn't get a flat, because if she falls off and hits her head, we're in trouble. So she was tough enough to go through all of that and qualified, went to Beijing, came out with a silver medal, which was worth gold as far as everyone else concerned.
Yeah.
So it was a gutsy effort.
That's incredible. And where do you think athletes can? You'll see other athletes as well, obviously not just the top of the tree, but where do you think they fall down on being able to reach the very top echelon of performance? Do you think it is a confidence issue? Why do you think some achieve and some don't?
Well, at the end of the day, it's in the grey matter, isn't it, of the person. So when I can't run the race for them, I can't sit on a bike. All I can do is get my body prepared to go. Then the coaches, the psychologists, everyone else have input into that, but it's in that person. They've just got to want it.
Yeah,
I think.
So you've been on the coast now for a couple of years, seeing athletes, seeing medical patients as well.
Well, I've probably gone under the radar a bit. So
you're reserved.
I was pretty burnt out leaving Adelaide. So I failed marriage and I was working big hours, and I just thought, I can't do this and stay in a partnership with 9 partners just at the coalface all the time. So I thought I could have stayed there. That was fine. But I felt like I wanted to be a physio for another 10, 15 years at least, but I needed to just calm down a little bit. And having worked with Sally for 10 plus years, I was regularly in Queensland, and I thought, to the sunshine, and just I was a keen cyclist, runner, environmental issues. I thought the opportunity was now. So I had 4 months off, chilled out a little bit, and I was still travelling. So the last 2 years up until the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, then I decided, well, I can't keep going away for 3 months of the year, just 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, come back, work for 2, go away. No one knows me. You're on the coast. It's time to get serious.
Yep.
So it's pretty well what I'm doing now. So it's just trying to get the connections up, and I want to be involved in a multidisciplinary clinic and replicate.
In the same vein as what
I've done.
Yeah.
So, the last 2 years. That's where the
passion comes from.
Yeah, I've worked with an orthopaedic surgeon, and that's good, but I realise I need some GPs around me, and I'd like to work with some other physios, and I have a little bit of knowledge. So the other thing is, speaking to some of the high flyers on the coast, is like, my value here is to be involved in a bigger clinic and probably take on some new graduates 2-3 years out and mentor them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'd like to do in the next 10 years. And then, obviously I like the hands-on work, but I'm counting the travel, I'm counting the elite level. But
so you're not going to Paris? No.
No, so I just want to see some young people being able to deliver the skills, because I see the training, particularly in the hands-on and manual area, as falling to the wayside a little bit. And that's just on the weight of numbers and not having the experience to be able to treat and to get mentorship from good practitioners. So the people that are going to be good from here on out are going to be people that take on skills and learn from experienced people.
Well, they're in good hands because, as I said, I've been through 1,000 of physios, and I've never had, it hasn't even come close to what you offer. So they're in good hands.
Let's do it, Richard.
All right, before we go, we do the 5 quick fire questions. So number 1 tip, Stan Garland, for people wanting to be more successful in their life.
If I look back on my career, I'm thinking you need to listen. You need to listen, and you need to be a good communicator. And in my area, particularly as a physio, you need to be objective. So I see people not being objective. That objective means you do something, you test, you retest, you see what you've done, whether it's been successful or not. And if it doesn't, you change it and you continually reevaluate.
Number 1 tip for people wanting to find more happiness in their life.
Probably what I've learned over the time is to be humble, to have some humility, to continue to learn, and don't take things for granted. The people that love you, your friends, your family, the connections that you have, take it for granted.
I love that. Number 1 book, gifted or?
Well, I was talking to you about that the other day. I'm reading a book at the moment by Dan Carter. He was the number 10
fly half
for All Blacks for years, with a win-loss ratio of 90-odd% in the games that he played, untouchable. But his book, I suppose he documents it on how he prepared himself for games. So he would sit there weekly on a Sunday and reevaluate his week and set goals for the following week. He'd sit down the following Sunday and he'd tick boxes on what he'd accomplished and what he hadn't and why he hadn't it. So he was big on preparation.
I like that.
He hit little goals. He talks about humility and being humble. He talks about the team being more important than the individual. And his ultimate goal was to be one of the best All Blacks of all time, which meant that he had to be involved in a winning All Black team. Just about everything that I've read through his book I can apply to my career, and it's applicable to me. So I definitely recommend that book.
And I like that idea of, I think a lot of people, including myself, will get to a Sunday and go, okay, well, this is what we need to achieve for the next week. These are the goals, right? This is what, even to a level of saying, if I achieve this, it'll be a successful week. But I can't speak for everyone, but I don't necessarily look back in the last week and think, what are the wins, what are the losses, and what are the improvements? Because it's a data point, right?
Yeah.
It's to go, okay, I've had 7 days, let's call it that, of raw data to be able to evaluate why didn't things go the way that I wanted them to go in certain areas, and learn it's almost like machine learning, but for myself, to then make it into those lessons. And you're sort of almost creating yourself as a superhuman by just learning, by reflecting, which I don't do. I'm like, well, that's a write-off.
No, and I don't do it myself, but I read it and it hits home, and I go, this guy is so disciplined and not a big head. So he acknowledges the fact that the individual can't be a superstar and be in a good team. He's got to be part of a cog, and his role in that cog is to be whatever he decides is going to make the best fly half.
Like that. Most influential person in your life, Stan?
Well, it's an interesting question. So when you cued me on that one, I thought back on it, and I'd have to say it was a fellow called Dr. Greg Keane, who's just recently retired at 73 as one of the leading knee surgeons in Australia. He was the influential man in setting up the model of sports med in Adelaide.
Okay.
So back in the day, and he was a high flyer, he didn't need to do it. He got together with 2 or 3 other surgeons, the leading sports doctors and the leading physios, and went, how can we make what we do better? And he brought the idea of that model with these key practitioners into being, and that clinic has just gone from strength to strength. And that's the clinic that I bought into, and I had no desire to leave up until after 20 odd years. So
change.
I look back on it and I go, man, and particularly moving up here and just seeing that the health model is working like what I experienced in 1989 before this clinic evolved. I'm going, it's not rocket science, it's just basic.
Interesting.
But you have to get the high flyers to park their egos and be willing to work in a team environment. And then everyone wins.
Not siloed.
No.
Yeah, right. And finally, a guest, famous or otherwise, that you think we should have on the show?
Well, I've got connections with Sally Pearson. I think she'd be good.
That sounds good. She's a Queenslander.
She's a Queenslander, and she's passionate about these sorts of things, and He's good at promoting himself, but as I said, as someone with guts and determination, and obviously the talent, but could deliver when the chips were down.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Sounds good.
very good.
Stan Garland, watch this space, man. I think what you're trying to achieve here on the coast to mimic what you guys had in Adelaide is going to be changing life, a community environment changing, especially with the Olympics coming to the region in
Exciting.
2032. So it's needed, and you're a pioneer, at least in this area. So it's a pleasure to have you on, and thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Thanks, mate. That was Stan Garland, an absolute legend of a guy and such a wealth of experience when it comes to physio and all things high performance with athletes that he's worked with as well. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share it with someone that you think will take something out of it as well. And until next time, peace.